What if the man who just walked down from meeting God had to order the deaths of his own family, his own neighbors, his own tribe? Not soldiers, not enemies, his people. This is the part of the Exodus story most sermons skip over because it's uncomfortable. But today, we're not skipping it. We're going into it.
Most retellings treat this as a punishment story. Sin happened, judgment followed, lesson learned. We're not doing that today. We're asking a harder question. What does it mean when a community's fear becomes louder than its faith? This isn't just an ancient event. It's a case study in how quickly people abandon what they know to be true, when they feel abandoned themselves. Keep this question in your mind. Was this a story about God's anger or a story about human panic? By the end, you might land somewhere different than where you started.
40 days. That's how long Moses was gone. 40 days of a nation staring up at a smoking mountain, waiting for a man who had rule, promised them freedom to come back down. No phone call, no update, just silence and smoke and thunder that never fully stopped.
Pause here. 40 days doesn't sound long until you remember these were people who had just watched plagues, a sea split in half, and a pillar of fire lead them through the night. They had seen impossible things, and still 40 days of silence was enough to break them. Here's what rarely gets said. This wasn't a crowd of skeptics. These were eyewitnesses to miracles. That's the disturbing part. Belief built on spectacle alone has an expiration date. If awe doesn't turn into trust, it evaporates the moment the miracle stops being visible. That's not an ancient problem. That's a human one, still running in all of us today.
They came to Aaron with a demand. Make us gods who will go before us. Not gods to replace their history, gods to replace their uncertainty. Aaron melted their jewelry, shaped a calf, and declared a festival. And the people, the same people who had walked through a parted sea, danced around a statue they built with their own hands.
Think about this. They didn't ask for a new god. They asked for a visible one. Something they could see, touch, control. That's the real confession happening here. That's idolatry as desperation. When the invisible God feels too silent, people build something they can hold. This is where many misunderstand the golden calf story. It's usually framed as betrayal. But look closer, Aaron even called it a festival to the Lord in the original account. They weren't necessarily trying to abandon God entirely. They were trying to merge their fear with their faith, to make God more manageable. That's arguably more dangerous than open rebellion because it disguises itself as devotion.
Moses comes down the mountain carrying the words of God in stone and finds his people dancing around a statue they melted from their own earrings. He shatters the tablets at the base of the mountain, not out of tantrum, out of symbol. The covenant is broken before it's even delivered.
Pause here. The tablets weren't destroyed because Moses lost his temper. In the ancient world, breaking a covenant document was a formal legal act. It declared the agreement void. Moses wasn't losing control. He was showing them physically what they had just done. But this is where everything changes. Because what happens next isn't really about punishment. It's about a decision every single person in that camp had to make, instantly, publicly, with no time to think it over. Moses stands at the entrance to the camp and calls out, "Whoever is for the Lord, come to me." No trial, no debate, just a line drawn in the dirt and a choice.
The sons of Levi step forward. Moses gives them an order most people can't fully process the first time they hear it. Go through the camp and strike down those still consumed by the rebellion, even if it's a brother, a friend, a neighbor. By the time it's over, 3,000 are dead.
This is the part audiences flinch at, and they should. This isn't a comfortable detail to sit with. But flinching is the point because the text isn't asking you to celebrate this. It's asking you to feel the full weight of what happens. When a community's collective failure reaches a breaking point, here's an angle rarely explored. This moment isn't really about outsiders being punished. Israelites faced an impossible choice to side with their own community or stand apart. They weren't rewarded for violence, but set apart for sacred service. Their story isn't about warfare, which raises a striking question. What does it mean that the tribe defined by this brutal moment became the tribe defined by devotion for the rest of the nation's history? Maybe the story isn't about who they killed. Maybe it's about who they became afterward. Strip away the ancient setting for a moment. What you're left with is something painfully modern. A group of people who panicked in the absence of certainty, built something to fill the void, and then faced the consequences of that choice together. Some owning it, some running from it. Think about this. How many of us have built our own golden calves? Not out of gold, but out of control, distraction, certainty we manufacture ourselves, because waiting on something unseen felt unbearable. This is where the story stops being about Moses or Aaron or the Levites and starts being about the space between promise and fulfillment. Every person alive lives in that gap right now, waiting for something that hasn't arrived yet. The story of the golden calf isn't about dancing around an idol. It's about what we build while we wait. Moses goes back up the mountain after this, not to hide from what happened, to intercede for the very people who just failed. That's the detail that gets buried under the shock of the number 3,000. The story doesn't end in judgment. It ends in someone standing in the gap, asking for mercy on behalf of people who didn't deserve it yet. Maybe that's the real ending worth sitting with. Not the 40 days of waiting, not the calf, not even the 3,000. But the fact that after all of it, someone still went back up the mountain to plead for the people who broke faith in his absence. So here's the question worth carrying with you. In the waiting periods of your own life, the silence, the uncertainty, the delay, what are you building? And if you had to answer for it today, would you be proud of what you'd made? Let that sit with you for a moment. That might be the real story here.